Live from P&T, it's Weekday Night Live. On Thursday, September 18th, P&T Knitwear was pleased to welcome Vulture writer Sean Malin to celebrate the release of his book, The Podcast Pantheon, 101 podcasts that changed how we listen.
Thanks for being here. I'm Bradley Tusk. This is my bookstore. Really excited to have you guys here, and really excited especially because this event tonight is about something that means a lot to us, which is podcasting. So you might have noticed when you walked in the studio out front. It is, as far as I know, the only studio in New York that's free for anyone to use. So if any of you guys have a podcast or want to try a podcast, all you got to do is go on our website, ptknitwear.com, and sign up, and you're welcome to use it. But we, really believe in kind of the power of podcasting and what it means to, educate people, enlighten people, entertain people. But, what I've found, and I suspect no one would be here if they didn't agree with this, is, I host a podcast called Firewall. Nothing creates a better bond between a listener and a host, or a listener and a guest, than a podcast. It has this sort of magic that no other format that I've ever seen does. And that just makes it sort of intimate in a way that really no other form of modern media is. So we believe in it deeply. We have a great group tonight. We're super honored to have them all here. You already know who they all are, so I don't think this requires much in the way of introduction. But our four panelists are the great Ira Glass, Dan Taberski, who is also my friend, Pam Grossman, and Negin Farsad. And Negin might even start recording her podcast here, which would be like the best thing of all to come from tonight. And they're here because Sean Malin wrote a fantastic book about podcasting that really seems like it'll become the kind of 101 or whatever the right thing is for podcasting. And so we're super psyched that he wanted to do this event here and that everyone joined him. And thank you guys for coming. And with no further delay, here we are.
Hi. Oh my God, it's so exciting to see all of you. Thank you so much. I have notes. I'm kind of that kind of person. Let's see. First, I want to thank P&T Knitwear for having us. What an incredible space this is. Unbelievable. Warm, they say in the audio community. Warm, it's warm. I also want to say thank you to Chronicle Books. There are some people here today. Thank you so much for taking care of this book, for making it, oh my God. Is this the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life? An object of art. Thank you. I cannot wait to have 50 of them in my house. And I want to thank the David Black Literary Agency. Thank you so much for helping this book and shepherding it from start to finish. And lastly, thank you everybody who showed up today. This is the first book ever published on the critical standing of podcasts, the first one ever. It's the canon. It's the establishment of the first formal pantheon, as we say. 4 years ago, I saw a professor of mine right at the end of COVID. He got a little finger in my chest. Hey man, I've been reading your column at Vulture. Where is the book? Why aren't we talking about this? Why is there no media scholarship for a popular audience on what podcasts are, what they're doing, what they mean to the world, and how they're changing everything? And that was years before they impacted elections or were shifting the world order. And he was prescient. I owe him everything, because after that came the formation of this idea. And here we are now with a finished book celebrating these amazing 101 podcasts, the 101 podcasts that changed the world. I want to start by reading a little bit of how this idea came to be. I'll sit here since there's no mic on the chair. So the goal of this book was to elevate podcasts to the same critical realm as literature, fine art, film, cinema, music. Film and cinema are the same, I believe. I heard that somewhere. Television, I meant. And I wrote something to that effect in the introduction. In 2004, the journalist Ben Hammersley offhandedly used the term podcast to describe what was then a recent rise in online radio production he attributed to the advent of Apple's iPod and other MP3 players. At the time, well-known internet blogging pioneers like Dave Weiner, Christopher Lydon, Doug Kay, and Adam Curry were discovering that the lack of a pricey budget or recording studio was no longer the barrier to entry that it had once been when it came to finding one's audience. By uploading downloadable audio files directly onto the web, a practice that stretched back to the late 1980s but made popular by Napster, one could suddenly say anything one wanted to say without the interference of regulators or corporations. With no publisher to appease, no editor to report to, and an abundance of cheap tools, Hammersley wrote in The Guardian, anyone can be a broadcaster. iPod, broadcaster, podcast, et voila. Within a year, as Engadget's Thomas Ricker reported, Apple had built its first podcast directory into iTunes, thus taking independent broadcasters out of the realm of self-distribution once and for all, and putting them permanently into the ears of the world's listeners. The field expanded quickly and ferociously in response. Within months, celebrities, Ricky Gervais, politicians, George W. Bush, and corporations like CBS had all launched shows in direct competition for spots on the iTunes Top 100 podcast list. In December of 2005, the editors of the new Oxford American Dictionary declared podcast the word of the year. Writing for Slate, Andy Bowers took things one step further, proclaiming it the year of the podcast. Bowers and the dictionary people may have been a touch hasty. 20 years since those bold declarations, we are just now entering by what by any metric must be considered what I call the golden age of podcasting. In January 2023, Forbes estimated that there were already more than 5 million active podcasts around the globe, with downloads in the United States alone accounting for more than 90 million listens per week, equal to about 31% of all Americans. Podcast revenue solely from advertisers is projected to exceed $4 billion in 2025, according to an IAB US podcast advertising revenue study, up from $708 million only 5 years previous. And that does not account for merchandising, live tours, or the more than 6 million subscribers who support podcasts directly on self-publishing platforms like Patreon, Libsyn, Red Circle, and Podbean. Seemingly every day, new podcasts are adapted into blockbuster films, event television, and best-selling books. Their hosts are immortalized in Halloween costumes, tattoos, and murals, and people even name their animals after characters from their favorite shows. At this point, everybody either makes podcasts, listens to podcasts, or gets FOMO from hearing everybody else talk about them. That is why the establishment of a critical canon representing the true GOATs in this massively popular medium feels so desperately overdue. That such a collection has not already been entered into the annals of entertainment history is understandable primarily as a matter of glut. In a landscape this expansive, keeping up can be a Sisyphean task, no matter how much free time you have. And there's a generational aspect at play too. Certain technological changes, such as Apple's removal of the headphone jack from iPhones in 2017, or the mass migration away from MP3 downloading toward audio streaming apps like Spotify, Amazon Music, and Deezer, simply occur too fast for some of us to keep up. At the scale with which podcasts are now, and even more pressingly will be consumed, the ramifications of this lack are too significant to ignore. Never mind the documented dangers of trusting the internet alone to maintain our media histories. In a world without an established pantheon for podcasts, how are those with no experience as listeners to keep from wasting their short, precious lives trying to find something they like without hearing thousands upon thousands of hours of trash first? How can anyone avoid the influence of corporate marketing, algorithms, or AI-generated listicles about what is truly worth one's time when the internet is our primary collective resource? And for that matter, what are the standards that differentiate a legitimately worthwhile podcast from an overhyped flash in the pan in the first place? The Podcast Pantheon was created to answer these questions. Whether you're a dedicated, omnivorous listener with decades of fandom, casual downloader looking to expand your horizons, an audio skeptic convinced that no show will match your particular wants and needs, or a late-to-the-game newcomer concerned that dipping even the tiniest toe into the podcasting world will overwhelm you, this book wants to help guide you through the labyrinth that is downloadable audio to a place of safety and warmth. The 101 podcasts profiled in this book represent the most groundbreaking, beautiful, compelling, experimental, touching, human, artful, and funny works the medium has yet offered, each distinct from the next in its accomplishments. In some cases, the podcasts were selected because their creators are indisputable pioneers in the field. In others, the podcasts themselves influenced history, reshaped popular culture, or impacted the minds and hearts of their listeners in discernible ways, sometimes with just one masterful episode. And there are also shows in this book known only to smaller niche audiences, but deserve something more. Hidden gems with the potential to change listeners' lives for the better, but obscured by the more widely known, well-moneyed, and influential players in this industry. What this book cannot and does not attempt to do is speak for everyone who loves, hates, or makes podcasts. For one thing, while I have spent far more time than the average listener enjoying, consulting for, guesting on, and writing about podcasts as a working cultural critic since 2007, I am limited by my monolingualism to those first produced in English. Podcasts are a global art form, and this book recognizes that there are worlds upon worlds upon worlds of multilingual audio outside the United States that it does not explore. Additionally, the pantheon that I propose here intentionally excludes any podcasts that do more harm than good to the world, whether as mouthpieces for hate speech or for the literal or tacit espousal of political or physical violence against others. Undeniably, many of these such programs carry immense influence in our society and deserve to be recognized for that influence, however insidious, by scholars in this field. As the adage goes, those who ignore history are doomed to repeat it. But I am a podcast critic, not a historian. And the Podcast Pantheon is not a history book. So, fuck them. Okay. With that said, I think it's time to bring some of our panelists out. What I want to do is read a little bit from the chapters about each of them. Some of them really need no introduction, but I'll introduce them anyway. We'll just give the benefit of the doubt to the audience. And if you have the book, can you hold up the book if you have it with you? Okay. If you'd like to follow along, I'll call out the pages for you, and we can start that way. I'll just read a little bit. You don't have to see the whole thing. The first podcast that I want to talk about is on page 136. It's Headlong. Missing Richard Simmons. Check. The central mystery of missing Richard Simmons is not, as the title suggests, why Richard Simmons sought privacy from the public after decades in the limelight, nor is it an effort to force the late but beloved fitness guru out of so-called reclusion to tell his own story. Rather, at the core of this heartbreaking investigative podcast is the constant niggling ache one feels when a trusted friend retreats into a smaller world that does not include them and never says goodbye. This first installment in the retroactively named Headlong series was produced by Topic Studios, Pineapple Street Media, now Pineapple Street Studios, and Stitcher, and released in 6 parts in early 2017, with a few bonus half episodes following later to frenzied acclaim. It was co-created by Henry Malofsky of the similarly brilliant Still Processing and Wind of Change podcasts, among others, and Dan Taberski, a filmmaker and producer for The Daily Show. The latter, a former student at Simmons' Slimmin studio, spent years getting to know the star, only to find their relationship suddenly over when Simmons disappeared into his palatial estate in the Hollywood Hills in 2014. Will you please help me welcome Dan Taberski?
Hello.
Yep,
Hello.
that works. Okay. The next podcast is going to be on page 230. This American Life. It is no accident that this book contains more references to This American Life than to any other program. Its creators, Ira Glass and Tori Malatia, are regularly described as contenders for the designation of Podfather, aka key figureheads in early podcast history. Glass, who also hosts, executive produces, and owns the show, may be the most recognizable voice in audio. But try to impress upon him the breadth of all this influence, and Glass demurs. Wow, that's really nice. We were early adopters. It isn't that he and Malatia were simply ahead of the curve when they launched TAL on WBEZ in 1995, though. They were the curve. The show pulled from theater, film, and literature to create something altogether unique on the radio, an hour-long nonfiction storytelling program centered around themes of shared experience in the Western world. Consider these decks. Bad neighbors. What can you do about them? People caught in limbo. using ingenuity and guile to try to get themselves out. Each episode was collapsed into acts, which in turn were constructed by a small team of producers and editors from a wide range of sources: investigative reporting, documentary footage, first-person monologues, book excerpts. Every theme required a distinct editorial approach, making the production polyphonous, multifaceted, and unpredictable. It was groundbreaking from moment one. Please help me welcome Ira Glass.
Hi.
That one works, right? Okay. Headed to page 168. Follow me. Fake the Nation. If there is any justice, it will not be long before Negin Farsad is as well known in the Western world as Samantha Bee, Whoopi Goldberg, and Bill Maher. All operate in the sphere of political comedy, digesting headlines and the latest current events through conversations with wonky, civically minded peers. The key difference comes down to Farsad herself, a weapons-grade wit, who over 400 episodes of Fake the Nation has proved as capable of hosting a presidential debate for CNN as she is an episode of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. More on page 110 about that. From its inception, her series has focused directly on issues of grave seriousness without batting an eyelash or losing its sense of humor. As a child growing up in the desert of Southern California, I thought that if you lived in New York City, you would always be throwing dinner parties with the most fascinating people engaged in the most scintillating and hilarious conversation. Farsad, a filmmaker and actor with a master's degree in African American Studies, shares. She was inspired to create the podcast, she adds, by the kind of imagery she saw on Friends and in high society magazines. Like you're witness to the coolest dinner party conversation with the smartest and funniest people, and that maybe Joey would fall off his chair for some reason. Farsad got the chance to make a test pilot in June 2016. The week she had selected to record it coincided with the deadly massacre at Pulse, a gay nightclub in Orlando, Florida. Fake the Nation was meant to be a comedic show about news and culture, so I figured the network would let me skip mass murder, she recalls. But no, they wanted to see how comedians handled appalling tragedy. Making the pilot called for a delicate balance of entertaining political analysis and respect for the families of those involved. Though it went unreleased, executives at Earwolf were impressed with Farsad's sensitive handling of the attack, greenlighting and launching the podcast the following month. Please help me welcome Negin Farsad. Here comes the mic check. Check that mic.
What?
Mic's on.
Oh, it's on.
Just making sure. Page 182. The Witch Wave. For Pam Grossman, creator and host of The Witch Wave, podcasting is a matter of life or death. While hers is in format primarily an interview show in the NPR style, Grossman has been called the Terry Gross of witches. At its heart is the more onerous project of educating listeners about the daily lived realities shared by countless numbers of people like her, modern practitioners of non-Abrahamic belief systems endangered by centuries of entrenched sexism, xenophobia, and misinformation. As a curator and historian on the subject, as well as the author of Waking the Witch, a stunning autobiographical tome about her embrace of alternative spirituality as a young woman, Grossman is a walking repository for all things magic. This is key because while cosmic spiritualism and the occult are experiencing what she calls a current trendiness, those whose only knowledge of them comes from fairy tales, urban legends, and children's stories, more often than not written and promulgated by men to enforce patriarchal hierarchies, still uses them to discriminate against the mystically sensitive. Grossman's job is therefore not only to research, write, and narrate each week's episode with the utmost fluency and verisimilitude on her subject, it is also to create an environment of trust and safety so that other keepers of ritual and craft can share their ancient knowledge without needing to worry about what kind of shit will get thrown at them on social media afterwards. Please help me welcome Pam Grossman. Sick. I'm so happy to see all of you. We'll start with a very nice, kind softball. I talked to about 140 separate podcasters for the book, as well as many producers, and everyone says that they have a ritual before they record. Can you share your private, personal ritual with people? We'll start with Dan.
I do. I close my shades. I actually. This is lame. I light Palo Santo. I like Palo Santo. I like.
Wow.
I know it's super witchy, right? Like I light like incense, and that's it. Crack manacles and go.
I feel so left out. I do nothing. I do literally do nothing.
Well, that makes sense for you, though. You've been doing it so long.
Yeah. No, like I feel like I take the script, it's printed out, I sit in front of the microphone, and I really just try to pretend I'm just talking to a person and not reading off of a page. That's it. It's very unromantic.
Do you close your eyes? Like pretending?
When I'm reading, I do. Yeah. Like often, like I'll read the thing and then I have to like it's really an act. Like I really struggle over how to perform on the radio even now. And for me, it's really an act of pretending that I'm not reading. And so, yeah, I will close my eyes.
Negin?
I mean, like in the first few, I would do something that I used to do for comedy when I started out, like in stand-up. I sing at the top of my lungs a U2 song called Desert Rose. Oh, no, sorry, God's Country. It's called God's Country. It started. Anyway, I know the song so well. And, no, and that just sort of like opens up my mouth. And that, so yeah. But then I stopped doing it because it's been so many fucking episodes. Like, how do you keep, anyway. But that's something I used to do. Sing it now. Sing it now. Desert sky. Sorry.
Will y'all share a mic? Yeah.
Thank you. We're sharing mics, right?
I think so.
Okay, great. I started doing something pretty recently when I have a guest, which is I ask them to, before we record, just kind of look at each other, and it can be over Riverside or it can be in person, and I just ask them to take a couple deep breaths with me, and whether or not that's witchy and magical or it's just like calming our nervous systems down and getting us present and on the same page, it works really, really well, and it certainly helps me.
That's nice. The four of you share a couple of things. One of the things that you all share is having an unmistakable voice. I mentioned it in the This American Life episode, but it's true that the four of you are unmissable. When did you first learn that you had a voice that people might enjoy listening to?
Well, I mean, also like a dumb actor and, and a comic or whatever. So like I had used my voice. I've done 8 audiobooks, not to brag. And I've done like, animated voice and I was the voice of Frito-Lays for a minute. So if you look at a potato chip and my voice comes to mind, that's why.
Wait, what was your line? Yeah, no.
Thank you.
We everything, of course. I think everyone in the room, we're speaking for everyone in the room. What was your line?
What's the
They
line?
had like a flavor for a while that I don't think they even have anymore. That I was like really very much the voice of, and it was like Chile Limon. But I'm Iranian, but I was really trying to put some Spanish stank on it. And but yeah, so I think like as an actor, I always like enjoyed using my voice, and people would say like, oh, I like your voice or whatever. Like, so I kind of sort of knew just like voice-wise that I had one, but also the funny thing that happens too, and I don't know if this has happened for you guys, is like I remember also realizing I guest hosted for WNYC for a little bit, and in the 12 to 2 spot, and I remember getting. I mean, people would complain about my voice in stand-up or whatever, but then when you get a complaint about your voice in radio, it's like hits different. And, so many people were like, oh, what a refreshing voice. And then a nice little minority of people were like, that woman should kill herself immediately. Her voice is so grating. Like, these are the worst 2 hours of radio I've ever heard in my life. And so that's also something that happens that I find fascinating.
Is that what you were talking about, Pam? That you like get feedback from people saying, we don't like your voice, it's no good?
No, I don't get that feedback. But, I was a performer when I was a kid, not to brag, but I was Lola in Damn Yankees. You're welcome. Thank you so much. One of the first things that people would sometimes say to me when I first started the Witch Wave and I was trying to be NPR and doing more of a slow cadence, people would say, I love your podcast. I listen to it at night and it helps me go to sleep. And I was like, that is not at all what I'm going for. So it was a really good note because it helped me be more conversational and calibrate a little bit better.
Oh, me? I wasn't forced into it, but the circumstances were just like, yeah, it made the most sense that it would be my voice. But I had been a producer before that for years and years and years, directing and producing. And so I've worked with a lot of talent, and I've done scratch track for them, which is really helpful because you have to pretend to be them in order to sort of imagine what it is like when they come in and record it themselves. And then I did radio in college, but just sort of as a goof, like I was not good. But the good thing that did help me with is just realizing that it just didn't matter. Nobody cares. That to get over it, you just need to get over yourself. You're not trying to sound like a certain something. You're trying to express something, and the way you express something, it doesn't sound as good as you want it to, but it gets the point across, I think.
Ira's nodding in agreement.
Yeah, I totally, and I really relate to that. Like, I was a producer for NPR before I was ever on the air. And when I started to try to put myself on the air, when I was still working on the daily news shows at NPR, I was such a bad performer. And I really sounded like somebody, I sounded like somebody who was imitating somebody on NPR, but doing it badly. and really struggled with performing on the radio. And all my early stories, my voice doesn't appear. It's just the interviewees. And really had to think about how do I want to sound. And at some point I was able to competently perform as an NPR reporter. And then around the time I was 29 or 30, I thought I don't actually like the NPR sound. And I tried to, I thought I don't like the way this sounds, the whole sound of the network actually. And I thought there's a way to perform on the radio that would just be much more live and real. And two friends and I started a local show in Chicago that we would do once a week at a time when most people weren't listening to the radio. And I basically took it as an exercise in practicing at performing, just sounding like I'm talking, even though I have a script and I'm hitting tape and I'm hitting music cues in a live radio show, and really just tried to reinvent the way I would sound. And my experience of people come up to me and say, you have a most amazing voice for radio. And I feel at the beginning, when This American Life went on the air, one of our problems with member stations is that the hosts, you have to talk all the stations into picking up your show when you're on public radio. There's no network that says everybody takes a show. You basically have to talk every single station into picking you up. And one of the pieces of feedback that we got from a few stations, not a lot, was there was a feeling of well, Ira was a good reporter and all things considered, but he's not a host. And the way that I talked was not seen as an asset. And when people tell me oh, you've got a great voice for radio, I feel no, that's not true. Actually, I have the most civilian voice. And some of the people who I've worked with in radio have incredible voices that really capture so much. I feel I have a very civilian voice, but because we've been on the air for so long, people think it's a good voice for radio.
Oh, so everybody's wrong about your voice being good.
Or I don't know, my experience of it is I feel I tricked people into thinking something that's not true. But yeah,
You made it true.
I guess.
Can everybody hear when he talks without the microphone?
No, I'm just trying to.
Okay, just making sure.
Because there's a recording being made, right? Okay.
There is a recording.
Okay.
Another thing that bonds the four of you is something that I thought was really important to do while we were here at this location in this part of the city, which is that you all record in New York. Your shows I wonder if you associate them as New York shows, if you would call them that way. I mean, Ira, you have people who work on your show from all over the world. Do you think of This American Life as a New York show?
No, I've never thought of it as a New York show.
But you have people here making the show.
But we don't do any particular kind of New York content.
Right.
We happen to be here. But the show was in Chicago before, and it wasn't different.
Right, yeah.
And the reason why is because the sort of stories we're doing are so specialized, where we need to go out in the world and find a story, and the story has to have a plot, and the plot has to have a beginning, middle, and an end, and drive at some thought, and the person has to be a decent talker. And like that in itself is so hard to find that like that's the thing that's controlling what we put on the air. Like none of us think of it as a New York show. And in fact, I think in general, to be a national show and sound to New York is a negative thing. And one of the advantages of being in Chicago is that if we would go out on the street and just interview random people, it didn't sound like it's like Chicago just is a Midwestern city with like lots of different people. And it didn't have the feeling of like, oh, I'm hearing that you get here, oh, I'm hearing New York City, which is so overcovered and so over-documented in film and TV. And no disrespect to New York, I live in New York. I like living in New York. But like for somebody making a product to go out to the country, I actually think it's a disadvantage to be in New York.
Yeah, like Pam, your show is completely New York. I mean, the show's made here, you live here. Do you see your show as a New York show? The whole community formed around that here, right?
I mean, I think of the show as a New York show insofar as like the psychogeography of New York State is a very magical place. There's a long history of New York, and I'm talking broadly upstate and also the city, as being like this hub for spiritual seekers. If you think about the 19th century spiritualist movement, if you think about the Theosophical Society, like that all started in this area. Ira and I were talking earlier about Margot Adler. She was an amazing NPR correspondent. She also wrote the book Drawing Down the Moon in 1979. Some of you might be familiar with it. For those who aren't, it was the first anthropological study of Wicca, paganism, Druidism, and she became so enraptured with this content, she ended up becoming a Wiccan high priestess herself, and she was an NPR correspondent for like 30 years or something. And so I see myself as kind of a keeper of that flame. In terms of the community here, like, yeah, you can find everybody in New York City, so I can certainly find a lot of witches here, but we have people from all over the world who, do it remotely, but it's always fun when they can come to the studio.
Negin, I'm interested in, you said when we spoke that you're from Southern California, but you make the show in New York, is that correct?
That's right.
Have you always?
Yeah, it's always been here. And I do think it's a New York show.
I was going to say, would it have changed if you made it?
People have just thrown you under the bus. Not me, Sean.
Thank you.
But I do. I mean, it's funny because the logo for the original logo for the show was literally just buildings and then Fake the Nation. It didn't make sense, and they made me change it. But I was just like, it's a New York show. It's new, and it's me and a rotating cast of mostly comedians plus some civics nerds or journalists, but the ones who can hang, and the one like you said, you can find anyone in New York. And also, I just feel like the comedians. Look, New York has great comedians, and so I do want people to kind of associate the cast of the show, the panelists on the show, as like from the wide bank of comedians that we have here, and so in that sense, I was always kind of like proud to showcase the New Yorkness of the show, even though we're addressing stuff for the rest of the country. And it's so interesting because I feel like maybe. What, has that limited my audience? Probably, but I don't know, or it just there's little patches of like aspiring New York people in like everywhere, right? So I feel like they enjoy that aspect of it.
I'm sure.
Ira.
Dan, you're in a unique situation here, which is that you make a number of shows. You haven't just made one, you've made plenty. Who here is a fan of Hysterical? Podcast of the Year 2025? Hysterical. Clap for Dan. A clap is well worth it if you have to be told, by the way, to clap. You've made shows all over, and you have crew from all over. Henry Malofsky is not based here, and it's like, do you continue to work with a New York staff? Do you work with crew all over? How do you get these?
It's all fakakta now. After the pandemic, and now a lot is on Zoom. Like even when you ask me, like, what do you do before an interview? Like just the fact that I was talking about, I'm always sitting in the same office doing the same Zoom interview now, when it wasn't like that before. In regards to New York, I feel like a New York person. I am New York. I was I was born and raised here. I grew up in Queens. I went to high school in the Bronx. I live in Manhattan, and you know, I lived in California for 6 years, and that's actually when I met Richard Simmons. And then when I moved back in 2013, and it really unlocked a lot creatively for me being back in the city. There was something about LA I didn't understand, and there was something about New York that I did. And so I think I take that with me. I don't know that it presents like, hey, not New York, but like
You're walking here.
I think right. I think I'm proud of the city. I like a city of immigrants, and like I just like the whole thing.
You think that influences the work that you make, being
Yeah.
from here?
Totally, yeah, for sure. And also, I did a project called 9/12, which was a series about post 9/11 America, and 9/11 fan. And there was something about that. That was very New York centric, obviously, but there was something about I just felt really confident. Like I can do this. I can talk about this. And there's something about that I wouldn't do the same. That's something that happened in LA, but New York, I felt like I can do that.
Raise your hand if you work in the podcast industry here, please. I would really like to know from this panel, on a more macro scale, what you think New York's role is. What you see from the inside of your own creative endeavor as New York's role in podcasting. Is it the hub of podcasting? Is it a satellite? What do you see the city's role in the making of podcasts and in the podcast, takeover of media? What has New York contributed to that?
Oh my God, isn't there so much more in like Austin right now? I don't know.
Austin has a huge scene. You will note that there's not a single Austin podcaster featured in the book.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, I feel like I don't know enough about the podcast industry to fully answer this question, but like New York pretty early on became a hub for like a bunch of creative narrative podcasts. So in that corner of it, because part of our show was here, and then we moved our show here in 2004 or 5 or something, and then Radiolab was here, which was really reinventing what you can do as a podcast, and then Gimlet started here, which was made by one of the people who left This American Life, Alex Bloomberg, and the whole idea of Gimlet was to create an army, a whole generation of podcasters, and there are people who are working all over podcasting who came out of that, and there's a whole there's a whole set of production companies around New York City, which are doing lots of them are doing kind of like narrative stories like the ones we do, which really, I have to say that saying, like, the stuff that we do is the stuff that is actually the stuff that I think is becoming extinct fastest because it's the most expensive and labor intensive. And so just to be able to get enough listeners to support a staff to do a show that takes you, 8 months or 10 months to do 6 episodes or 8 episodes, that's a very tough thing to pull off. And so we are on the decline, whereas like talk podcasts, like you guys do, or Joe Rogan, and just like all the bro comedy podcasts, like that's what's on the rise. And I feel like New York really became a place for kind of the narrative-based podcasts, even like Malcolm Gladwell and like his show and Michael Lewis's show, like that, which is all Pushkin. Like there's just a bunch of production houses that are in and around New York and New York State. So.
What about infrastructurally? I mean, in terms of getting access to studios, that's not so easy outside. How does New York help with that?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I live in Brooklyn, and I walk to the studio. I rent it by the hour, and I take my little 15-minute walk, and so it's incredibly convenient, which I love. So yeah, I'm sure there's like a real proliferation of studios and access in that way, and I appreciate that a lot.
But there are podcast studios everywhere. Like my wife was shooting a TV show in Budapest, and I had my pick of podcast studios there.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like you can go anywhere in the world, and there's like a bunch of very solid, like cheap or reasonably priced like podcast studios. And so like this is a global phenomenon, and also it's really cheap to make a podcast studio. Like you just need a quiet room with a mic and a computer. So.
Yeah, I went to Austria a couple of years ago, and it was just before things had really exploded in the podcast world there. Sports podcasts were having a moment when I went there. And what they were doing was recording live at stadiums. You know, soccer, football is a really big deal there. And you have these podcasts with crowds being, I could never imagine something like that. You know, on Radiolab, they'll get like ambient noise from the street, like Jad is like recording people on the subway. But I don't know. I like to think that New York does have a very specific community around how people love podcasts and how they listen to them. Maybe it's just an audience question.
And I also think it has to do with, I mean, not to be too NPR over here, but like WNYC is so great.
Important.
It was on all the time in my home before I discovered podcasts, but it's still on every day. Like we were just talking about Brian Lair. I mean, like there's these characters that you sort of, that was my whole, I think I really fell in love with audio because of WNYC. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Holy cow.
Here's a tricky one. It's a little personal. Do you feel like leaders in podcasting? I realize that podcasting is a very democratized, that's the thing that everybody talks about. Oh, anybody can make one. It's very democratized. And there's communities everywhere. Yes, I agree with all of that. On the other hand, I think that there are podcasters, and I include all four of you in this without hesitation, that many of the people who make podcasts or are dreaming of making podcasts in the world, whether it's for YouTube or Spotify or their friends, look to the four of you for a specific kind of instruction. Does that bleed back into what you decide to do in your work? Dan, you're a Pulitzer Prize nominee. I mean, you must have people who are watching what you do really actively. Do you feel like a leader? Does that carry pressure with it?
No, I'm not a leader, I'm. It's fun. I actually like. I've been thinking a lot of people have been thinking a lot about this lately, but I'm looking for a leader. Not only am I not the leader that I've done introspection, I've looked, and I'm not the one. And but I'm open and ready to receive the leader.
You mean a leader for podcasting or for the country as a whole?
Both. It's not I can't, for the country as a whole, for sure. That's really what I'm talking about. But even for podcasting, it's not in my personality. I think you need a certain type of personality to be a leader. You need to be thinking about other people and their needs and putting them, and I think it's like my husband has it. It's like an instinctual sort of thing. Like you meet a bunch of people and automatically you're thinking about what it is they're all kind of looking for. And there's a way to exploit that. But there's also a way to sort of like make you be like a really great person to know because they just like love doing that shit, like helping people. That's a leader, and it's not me.
What about you two? I mean, like Pam, you have a Patreon. Like people follow you.
Yeah.
They're literally called followers.
I did not call them that myself, though. No, I don't feel like a leader at all. I mean, the Witch Wave is 100% independently produced. So I'm not hanging out with like a lot of, actual producers. I am the producer. I am the person. For a long time, I was editing every scrap of the show myself and taught myself how to edit. I feel like I'm really, in some ways, making it up as I go along, and I feel very fortunate that I've been able to find an audience that connects with what I do. But no, I don't think I would ever call myself a leader in the space. I'm thrilled to be in your book. I'm thrilled to be here. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think I do.
Okay, I think what we've established here is that like no one wants to call themselves a leader because it makes us seem like an asshole if we do that. So I too am not a leader, just so we're clear, not a leader. But I will say something that I feel like has emerged just with like my understanding of what the audience needs from my podcast. And I feel like Ira's like, really? Okay. No, what? No, okay, yeah, okay. I realize I was always, I've tended to have an optimistic take. Now, this is a culture and politics podcast. The politics part can be really rough. You probably can guess from 10 miles away what my politics are.
Everyone shout out your guess.
So I'm really conservative and I'm very MAGA. And no, but I mean, so this has been a crazy time and sometimes like a dispiriting time. And I've always been really like I'm very patriotic. I'm very optimistic, and I'm really like, and I strongly believe in this country despite everything that has even happened this week. And so we made T-shirts early on during the 2020 elections, because people would come, they would say a bunch of negative shit on the podcast, and I would say, that's one thing, but let's end on an optimistic note, because we're only doing optimism. And we made T-shirts that said, we're only doing optimism. People would buy them, and then they would wear them to the voting polls, or they would wear them to go knock on doors or whatever, and send photos and post photos, and that has been the kind of mantra. And so I think like the audience made clear that like what they need is they need an optimistic voice. That they cannot tune into another podcast that's going to make them feel miserable about politics. It has to have a different flavor. And so I think so I learned to just at least give them that, if that answers your question.
Thank you, dear leader. Ira, I think it's probably harder for you than anybody else, because, I can't imagine what it would be like to be as widely known as you are and to be known as the Podfather.
I mean, I can speak to the leader thing.
Yeah.
Like I think anybody who makes stuff for a living, like what you want to do is you just want to make stuff. I'm sure like a lot of people in this room, like they make stuff. And so like the pleasure of our work is it's like fun to make stuff. It's fun to think about what would be fun to make, and it's fun. I love interviewing people, and I like editing, and just like I like all the parts of that. But like the radio show I do, like it was consciously an invention to like our goal was to reinvent what you could make on the radio, like reinvent the sound of it, reinvent like the kinds of things that we would be documenting using the tools of journalism and applying it to things that were far more personal than journalists usually do, and just the feeling of it. Like the goal was to make something that would feel like, oh, I haven't heard that before. And then continually, like throughout the show's history, we've really tried to as much as we can, like just invent new things for ourselves to do that we've never done. And some of those are experiments, like spending 24 hours in a 24-hour restaurant, which was an early one, and just see like, can you make an hour of entertaining radio out of that? And like more recent ones, are just, we did a show on like rats, inspired by Mayor Adams' War on Rats, which was ridiculous. That we're just like, well, who is going to represent the rat voices? And then we had two actors co-host with me as rats, just like, so you're just constantly trying to just invent a new thing. And that's more interesting to me than any kind of like being responsible for something.
In the immortal words of Borat, great success. I mean, seriously, I think that you have maintained what I think people in media struggle to maintain largely, maybe because of podcasting, which is a sense that you have to continue to produce. You have to be a laborer. I mean, this is work. This is very hard work for the people who are in this industry. Many, many hours a day, constant refurbishment of the work that you're doing. It is laborious, and you seem to still be in touch with that aspect of the work that you do.
I'm very in touch with the labor of it, yes.
I think that's what makes you who you are.
I guess.
And why we love you. Okay. Let's talk a little about the book. I know it's hard to accept. My therapist knows that too. So I strive for a similar thing, which was to create something, to invent something, to put something out in the world that didn't exist before. I was inspired by 1001 Movies You Have to See Before You Die. I was inspired by Susan Sontag's essays. I was inspired by Roger Ebert, great movies, Pauline Kael. These were conscious inspirations. Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time. I thought we needed this for podcasts, but this is an incomplete picture that's been painted here. And I talked about it at the beginning. The four of you are just the tip of this iceberg. There's 97 other podcasts represented in the book. What would you like to see come next in the realm of podcast coverage, not just reporting in media? You know, Ashley Carmen is on the business beat for Bloomberg. You have these wonderful podcast, newsletters and collectives that are sharing information and access for many other people. What would you like to see the media respond to next in, people who are writers, journalists, publicists? What's the next step for covering podcasts? What needs to be brought into the light that hasn't been yet?
Okay, I feel like the media has gotten really into the manosphere podcast world. I feel like we got it. We got that story, right? And now, can we now identify another sphere? I'm guessing because there's several thousand podcasts, there are many spheres, and we can just start throwing those into the mix. What do you say, media?
What about you?
What about me?
What do you think? What's next? I mean, you are you're in the investigative journalism section of the book. I mean, you have your work.
Am I really?
Yeah, is that appropriate?
Yeah. No, I was thinking it's a little funny.
I realize that because there's the narrative aspect. But I mean, what are we missing as journalists in this world? What aren't we covering that we should be?
I honestly don't know how to answer that anymore. It's all really diffuse. I don't know who. Is this on? It is on. Boom.
Yeah.
It's all really diffuse, and I'm not even sure. There's a couple people writing about it that I know to go to directly. I wouldn't know where to find it otherwise. If I did find it, it would take me a while to sort of see what other work that person did to know if I should be listening to what they're saying or not. I think it's really exploded in a negative way, and it's completely atomized, and I actually don't see any ecosystem that's really writing about this sort of thing. Not just podcasts, but like podcasts as like people would want to write about film and books and television and all that stuff. Like I feel a lack of it. So I would like more of that. I don't know how you get it given the market realities, but
Yeah, I'll jump in. I personally would love more attention on podcasts that are not run by celebrities. Like, hooray for celebrities. They're very sparkly and shiny, but there's so many people who are making shows who are just doing it based on their lived experience or their weird fascinations, and it's not because they were already movie stars. So I'd love to see more of those highlighted in the press for sure.
I have a proposal. We're going to take a vote. It's a yay or nay, and then a why. We have some people here who are affiliated with the Podcast Academy and the AMBIES, which is the sort of annual awards body. Now, this is a very new awards body, and it's nascent in some ways, but they also have a really good sense of taste. They celebrate a lot of independent podcasts. There's more room to grow. My proposal is similar to what we see with the Emmys, where if we really want to see podcasts heralded in a certain way, the AMBIES have to expand their remit and not just cover podcasters or certain podcast genres, but also celebrate engineers, mixers, guests should be celebrated, researchers, bookers, all of the people at every stage of the labor process in podcasts should have an award. And the wider that goes, the more people are included in a ceremony that honors labor. Yay or nay?
Can I speak on this?
Yes, you may.
I say nay, and I counter-propose that they should do away with podcast awards. There's no reason to have podcast awards, because the reason why you have the Emmys or the Oscars is because if you're in the movie business or the TV business, like it successfully attracts people to your product and helps your career. But I don't think that those awards ceremonies do that. Like there's no function to them. They don't actually yield anything. And so it's this massive wanky exercise. And like, I just
He
feel
wants
like
more of it.
Yeah,
Well,
and
no,
so I don't think we want that. And I think if they're going to start to give out like awards, like I don't know, it just seems like a waste of time.
I mean-
I think what would be better would just be more of the traditional. Just if they're just thoughtful people writing about podcasts, spotting random good ones, and having the kind of like writerly authority to get across what's good about them, and being good enough researchers that they find random shit the rest of us aren't, that would do so much more. That's my pitch.
I will just say that, the Oscars were new at one time too, and there wasn't money behind the ceremony when they first started. I mean, this is a super
I know,
young.
but the idea from the beginning.
I don't
was-
disagree, by the way. I'm
You
playing
don't?
devil's advocate for
Oh,
the sake
okay.
of the audience. No, I'm not. I don't have one particular affiliation myself. It's a suggestion, but I like what you said.
I mean, my favorite part of award shows are how everybody dresses. And I don't think podcasters are necessarily like the best at that. I mean, like I try. Give me some budget and I'm there, baby.
No, I understand arguments.
No, we need to be more yes and with you.
I don't think that. No, Look, I'm a professional. In all seriousness, like I said in the intro, I actually think it's good that there's been some. I don't know if I would use the word negativity, but not necessarily like a hopefulness about this industry, because of course, in many sectors of this industry, there's a big feeling that one version of it is going the way of the dodo, and another version is taking hold. That being said, when I spoke with you, Ira, you were the first person to agree that we are in the golden age of podcasts, and it was very empowering to hear you say that.
Yeah, no, I do agree.
Yeah.
With you. Yeah, like there's wonderful work being made now.
Dan, you feel the same way? Do
That
you
we're in
think
the
that
golden age of podcasting?
at the beginning that it's starting now?
Yeah, my personal take is that I think we need to start to dissolve the differences between podcasts and books and film and television. And I feel like there's a big audience for people who like all that stuff together, and I feel like they talk more than people acknowledge, and I feel like there's a lot of interesting things going on about how they go back and forth and what podcasts mean to a book and what a book it's just nonfiction in general. I feel like needs more attention, and I feel like it's an amazing time for that. It's just hard to keep up with. But if you can get used to the idea that, I mean, podcasts didn't exist when I went to college. Like, it wasn't even a thing, and now that's what I do. And now they're getting harder to make, and I might not be able to keep doing it. And so, but whatever the next thing, you need to be flexible enough so that if the next thing is like sound stories and laser guns and you shoot people with it or something like that, maybe that's what I'll win like a lazy Ambi or whatever.
Dan Taberski's Star Wars podcast.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
But I think it's about being flexible enough to understand that a lot of these formats are formed because the market allows for them. That's where podcasts came from in the first place, and now it wants something else. And I think if you can hop around and really embrace it more holistically, I think that has an amazing future.
And I think also, given the amount of time it's been going on for, I feel like podcasts went through their sort of like .com bubble phase, like that happened like in the late 90s or early 2000s or whatever, where it was like mittens.com is going to be the next big, and then it's like, no, it wasn't. Those things failed, and then it settled into a time where like the stuff that made sense stayed, right? And I think right now, especially with the celebrity stuff, it's like this frenzy over celebrity things, I think might start to hopefully settle down, and then it's like, okay, what's actually good that will remain or emerge? And that feels like maybe the era that we're hopefully in, that with all of the mergers and acquisitions notwithstanding, but yeah.
You feel the same?
I was thinking about this in the context of, and I know you don't want to get too much into like the financial aspect of things.
Please go for it. I think, I told the podcasters that we had some like topics that we weren't going to go into beforehand, like AI and like the death of podcasting. But, you are absolutely welcome to, it's worth talking about because these are important real world factors that we're all dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the barriers of entry right now is that people do expect a higher production value. I know you also don't want to talk about video. I'm so sorry. It's like all the taboos. I'm bringing them into the room. But a lot of podcasters now are feeling pressure to do video, and that costs more money to produce and to have someone edit, or it takes more of your own time to do that. And so on the one hand, that's great. Quality is increasing. And on the other hand, I do feel like it's a little bit harder for people to be scrappy about it and find like their audience. So I don't know. I feel, I have mixed feelings about it, I suppose.
I feel like if I hadn't set rules, you wouldn't have brought any of that up.
I know. That's how I roll. I'm sorry.
I'm teasing. We want to do some audience questions, but before that, I just have one last question for the four of you. You all make audio for a living, and thank God for that. But do you think we should make listening to podcasts in public without headphones illegal and possibly penalty of death?
100%.
Yes.
Well, yes, and then I also want to say, maybe more controversially, I think people should not listen to anything when they're in public, and they should go back to the
Hear, hear.
ancient art of eavesdropping the way God intended.
Okay, well, we're going to take questions here in just a second. Is this not working now? I think so. But this is working. Can we please just have a hand for these amazing panelists? Thank you. Okay. We're going to take a few questions. For P&T, do we know how much time we have before we're going to sign some books? Somebody shout out the time.
7:15.
Perfect. Okay. We'll do a few questions. Please, nothing scary. Be normal. I will. I'll take the question. I'll repeat the question back. Jenna, are you gonna? Oh, my hero. Thank you. I see one over there.
All right, we'll share this mic.
Does everybody know who this is? Who's about to speak? This is one of the heroes of podcasting.
Okay.
You can introduce
Thank
yourself.
you. My name's Ariel.
Mason Black.
I would love to know without any, if you could all go to your phones and tell me the last thing you listened to. And what
Dan?
app. I'm also curious about what app you use. Hopefully it's not scary. And if it's a song, it's a song, but I would prefer...
I use Overcast, which I don't like anymore. And the last thing I listened to was... I was listening to Amy Poehler's podcast. That's so basic. Even though it's amazing, but I'm a big nerd. It's really good with Olivia Colman. She does good conversations.
I'm using Pocket Cast, and last thing I listened to is the 2 recent episodes of The Daily. The Daily is a show that the New York Times puts out. It's very popular.
I think the last thing I listened to was Slate's Political Gabfest, and my show is essentially a version of Slate's Political Gabfest, but with comedians. Now you know my dirty secret. Oh, it's it's something random from 10 years ago that doesn't get updated anymore, and I should definitely get rid of it. It's embarrassing, and I can't remember what it's called.
Oh my God, I feel so basic. I just use the podcast app on my phone. Is that am I not supposed to do that anymore?
That's fine. It's wonderful.
Okay, great. The last thing I listened to, actually, a friend of mine, some of you might know, Steve Burns from Blues Clues. He has a new podcast that just came out called Alive with Steve Burns. This sounds like a plug. I guess it is. I don't mean it to be, but I listened to it because he's the season premiere guest on The Witch Wave for season 9. So I needed to hear his show, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's so beautiful and moving, and he does this thing with ASMR where you hear him pouring tea, and he leaves space for you to feel your feels, and he interviews all kinds of incredible people about death and sex and dreams, and it's incredible. It's called Alive with Steve Burns.
Lemonada Media. Yeah, the last thing I listened to was the Calm app in the taxi on the way here for my first event. Other questions? Right there in front.
Hello. Thank you all. I was wondering if there are any business models for podcasts that you're excited about, and if that's I can't remember, evil question, I apologize.
There's a show called Search Engine that PJ Vogt is doing. He was one of the hosts of Reply All, and for me as somebody watching it, I feel like I see a lot of people who are trying to do narrative journalism, trying to do like basically stories, reported out stories like we do, but it's so expensive. And what PJ and his editor Struthi have created is just like a model to do it. That's just a very small staff. It's basically a dressed up interview show, but he is so skilled as an interviewer and as a writer, just
So
very
good.
entertaining writer, that like they do it with a tiny staff. And if you haven't heard the show, like the premise of it is each episode they answer a question, no question too big, no question too small. And it's just like they just are choosing really well, but also it's a way, like they really, they're right now the biggest problem if you're trying to start a podcast is just how do you get anybody to listen to you, and how can you get the numbers into the hundreds of thousands so you can actually like make a living at it. And I feel like they really like kind of invented a thing through sheer like force of talent, actually, that they're making something that is as like captivating and magnetic as you would want as a listener, and different each week, but way cheaper to produce, actually.
Hi, I'm a high school English teacher, and I have the opportunity to teach podcasts to my kids as a text. Thanks. So I was wondering, do you have any podcasts or episodes of your own shows that you think that the 16 and 17-year-olds of the world should be listening to?
24 hours in an all-night restaurant. That's a classic.
I do want to plug Wait, Don't Tell Me, because it's interesting. It's a multi-generational audience. Oftentimes, I mean, I've been doing this show for like 8 years, and like people will come to shows like with their mom or whatever, and they'll be like, "Oh, I grew up on you," and I'm always like, "Shut the fuck up! I'm not that old." But it's really lovely because it's something they can enjoy as a family, and then they also, I mean, there's a real there's a real writer's room for that show. A lot goes into it, so I feel like it's really interesting to see how that all comes together as a for a young person.
One of the episodes that I'm proud of for my show is an episode I did. It was actually our 100th episode with a person named Starhawk. Some of you might be familiar with her. And she's really an elder in the modern pagan movement. And the reason I'm proud of that is because, with all due respect, paganism and modern witchcraft doesn't get a lot of coverage. I remember listening to Krista Tippett's show. She probably has the most, lauded show about religion and modern spirituality. I think she's done maybe one episode on paganism the whole time. I don't think she's ever talked to a witch. And yet we have a whole history. There are millions of people who are part of this community. And so I think that's a nice little capsule show. And I don't think I curse too much on that show. Potty mouth cursing, not hexing,
Other questions? Back there, gentleman there. We'll bring a microphone to you.
Hi, I've also taught podcasts in my college here in New York, and I very nearly came with conflicts and COVID. But you have just celebrated the 30th anniversary. You're celebrating it this year of This American Life. And I just am wondering, you've just written this book, Sean, that sort of tells us what podcasting is, but the New Yorker, where I worked for ages, is celebrating its 100th anniversary. And I'm wondering if you think any shows, any podcasts will still be able to celebrate their 100th anniversary. Just in general, the future of podcasts. Do you think they're going to survive? I mean, the daily is so popular. There's so many forms, but What do you think of the longevity of it?
The answer to this is undoubtedly audio will survive for a very long time. First of all, there are physical ways to get audio. We forget this because everybody streams and downloads their material, but I was on the P&T Knitwear podcast Firewalled earlier, or Firewall, and I was talking about a podcast that the comedian Neil Hamburger does, which you can only get as a 5-inch lathe vinyl. You cannot listen to it on Spotify. And the goal of that is to let people know audio is an object for people to love and treasure. And we used to, really value that. But tape cassettes are coming back, just like CDs had their moment, and vinyl is, of course, now back as a full industry. Podcasts are going to survive ad infinitum because people want to keep them with them. There are episodes of these shows that I treasure. I put into podcasts myself, like playlists. Each of these podcasts has an episode like that. I call it the Sean's Pick in the book, but people are going to want to keep their podcasts. They're going to want to get them signed by people like this panel, and audio will never die. It may just switch formats.
Thank you so much for the panel. My question is in relationship to podcast listening. And is there an equation there because we have 8 million people here and it's like sort of a walkable audio experience? Or does that not show in the numbers? Like, is it not a thing that it's created here because we're New Yorkers, so that makes sense?
I don't know
in
that
the
you can
world.
break the numbers down. I don't know that I've seen numbers broken down like that in terms of where people listen. I think people walking, certainly when I listen to it, but I also think people who drive is a big, or people who need to do anything with only half their brain. Yeah. That will never die.
Can I ask how you all discover something to listen to?
It's very hard.
It's hard. Like generally I'll discover stuff to listen to because somebody will reach out to me saying they're starting a podcast, and then I have to listen in order to have the conversation. That might not apply to you. So it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like one of those people that'll like just throw on to like Instagram, like, what is everybody listening to right now? Anything that's like, because I feel like I feel like I'm always searching for the Serial high. Like that first season of Serial, when everyone was just like drunk off of cereal, like that. I'm always like, what, can I feel that again? I want to feel that again. And so I'm always asking, posting to social media, which also we should all delete our accounts, but I do ask that question oftentimes and see what comes out of it.
Sean and I were talking about this before. I actually don't listen to a lot of witchcraft podcasts. I mostly listen to comedy podcasts. Like, I'm listening to Las Culturistas like everybody else is. And so, I mean, for me, it's like I listen to the shows that I love, and then I fall in love with guests, and then I go find out what their shows are. So it's like super organic.
I'd like to advocate for something that millennials have ruined, my generation has ruined, which is going down the rabbit hole. I think that you have seen so many people get poisoned by their algorithms that you forget that you can actually have the greatest time in the world continuing to explore and dig into, like, if you love this medium, if you love audio, you can follow people's footsteps as they go down. From Ira becomes Serial, from Serial becomes S-Town, from S-Town becomes all the amazing shows that Brian Reed has made. I mean, it's an ecosystem upon ecosystem upon ecosystem. The rabbit hole gets so much trash because you get red pilled on it, but sometimes you just get audio pilled and it's amazing.
Yeah. And from Negin, you go to Frito-Lay's commercials.
I think we've got time for one or two more. This side is actually banned from asking any questions.
Actually, it's a segue on that last comment about deleting your social media posts. And I don't know if this is an evil question, but I work in research, and we receive a lot of foundation funding. We woke up this morning to the news of another cancellation, and I'm just wondering how this latest turn in American kind of politics is influencing the choice of subjects, whether there are specific modalities that can be used to put pressure on podcasters going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I have to go on. CNN has a show called Have I Got News for You, and I've done the show a couple times, whatever. And it's like their comedy show, you know. Great cast: Roy Wood Jr., Amber Ruffin, Michael Ian Black, whatever. It's really fun, and I got a couple people being like, I don't think you should mention the dude's, you know, the name. It's like, I'm not mentioning it. You shouldn't mention his name. And I'm like, oh,
Wait, he's not Voldemort.
no. I mean, the like, if Charlie Kirk comes up, don't say anything. That's been like, and I'm like, well, that. And I'm accustomed to saying literally whatever the fuck I want, and I don't know what to do about that. And then also, like, we were trying to do, you know, we taped before that particular news broke, and so I wanted to do like a drop in the feed about, you know, what happened and just a little bonus conversation. And the person I did it, we did a little short chat, and then that person said, please don't post it. And so I think it's I don't know, and I don't have a boss, so I can't get fired by ABC so far as I know, but I just don't know what that means. I think it means less for someone like me, but I don't know, because I am also like affiliated with like wait and whatever, so I don't know. I
also want to say about evil topics, when I set out that we would have things that we didn't talk about, like AI or the pivot to video, what I was saying to the podcasters is that these is that these conversations are happening at anytime you get podcasters together at a festival or on a panel, the same 5 subjects get brought up all the time. Actually, you know, questions about data, about research, about how we're finding our audiences are absolutely essential to like making these podcasts successful in the long run. And I think the tech world, understanding tech was one of the hardest things about writing the book. It's a thing that a lot of journalists just have no concept of. Pam and I talked about this before, of like people who write about them, like a lot of cultural critics, have no idea how the sausage gets made. So I actually very much appreciate the question for these people, because the more that we know about how this stuff gets made, the more curious audiences are going to be. And also they'll start to put their money where their mouth is if they realize, oh, if I don't listen all the way through, if I only have an 83% listen rate and that hurts the podcaster, that kind of thing, they might lose their show. So like tech, AI, video, these are relevant, essential issues. I just didn't want this to be, you know, the same conversation that's happening online every single day.
But to answer your question, you're asking like what kinds of like pressures are on podcasters. Like I you know, like speaking for our show, most of our revenue comes from advertising, right? Like people are just like putting ads on the show, and that's such a diverse like group of people giving money. Like I don't worry about that we're going to say something that would threaten that. Also, we're doing such sort of traditional fact-checked journalism where we're thinking about what we're saying with a lot of intention. Like for us, I don't worry about that right now. Like we're pretty independent.
I'd love to speak to this. I think about it all the time as someone who is a public witch, who has a lot of people who identify as witches on the show. The Christian nationalist movement is on the rise, and even though they're saying they protect religious freedom, we know what single religion they're talking about. I was also raised Jewish. I'm a Jewwitch. Thank you so much. And so I think about this like a lot in terms of not just my own safety, but like the safety of my guests. And there are certain guests that I've wanted to have on the show, but because they've been in the news, let's say, I worry about the blowback on them. And I worry about, yes, by proxy, a little bit, the blowback on me. I don't think that's really necessarily self-censorship, but it is being realistic about the climate that we're speaking to right now.
Do we have a question up there?
Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the conversation. I obviously love podcasts. That's why I'm here. But I think, as you probably know, it's like a super saturated space right now with so many podcasts. So I guess I would just love to know, like, from your perspective, like, what makes a podcast, like, good or super compelling, and also just how to be a better listener.
Is this for me or for the panel or all of us?
Everyone.
I will say that there are certain things that a podcast has to have to be qualitative, like diversity in what they're programming, for example. If it's the same thing every week, I'm like everybody else. I'm bored easily. My attention span is, millennial-esque. It's very easy for me to just go, I can't do this anymore. So being adventurous is it's an important remit in podcasting. Also, I hate to say this, I talk about some of the podcasts in the book that started off with audio problems. Actually, I think there are a couple of podcasters here in the audience who are, their podcast is mentioned in the book. I won't call them out, they're already laughing. But, where audio was an issue at the beginning of the podcast. I'm like, well, I like the personality, but, it's true that the audio needs to be listenable. If you can't hear what you're listening to, audio doesn't succeed. That doesn't mean that it has to be high quality. It needs to be perceptible. That's the baseline for which all audio needs to be enjoyed, in my opinion.
God, I mean, it's such a big question. I think what makes someone a good podcaster is not stopping. I think you're not gonna. It just takes forever. It just takes forever. You just have to be the one who's still there. Like, it really is a big part of it, because I think that's what makes you good, and it's what makes you, and like, and people want things that they don't want you to phone it in. They don't want you to do it half-assed or part-time, or like to market your other thing. Or if you're going to do it and keep doing it and get better and innovate. And I think people can feel that. It's hard, unfortunately. It's certainly not easy, but I think that's what I like to hear.
That's okay. I feel like your answer was so good, it wiped my answer out of my head. I mean, I think what I'm looking for when I'm looking for something to listen to is just something I haven't heard before. And then I'm really into shows that are out to entertain, like that really have like the will to entertain. So.
Yeah, I think I also am just looking for, when it comes to like the chatty podcasts, of which I listen to a few, just like people who aren't like dicks. Like I like it when I like the people, which is it's a hard thing to, I mean, it's different for everybody, you know what I mean? But the like a likability quotient for me is big.
For me, it's when the hosts are genuinely curious and they don't want to just talk about themselves. Again, back to celebrity podcasts. I find some of them kind of unlistenable because they're not curious about the guest. They just want to talk about, their projects or talk about how they met the guest. And that's interesting to a point, but I want to learn about the guest. I want the host to be curious. So I think deep curiosity, genuine, sincere curiosity. And then just in terms of audio quality, please invest in like a really cheap filtering software and do mouth declick. It will take all your little mouth bubbles out. The sound of someone's tongue in their mouth moving around, I just can't. I can't.
I'm not into that. I think like make things sound real.